Hello, you are listening to Quality Time, a podcast designed to support Nebraskan providers through their journey with Step Up to Quality. I am your host, Colleen Schmidt. Get ready to listen as we prepare to elevate each other as we step up to quality. Welcome, everyone. Today, our topic is on outdoor education. Today on the podcast, we have Katie Krause and Hannah Rennard-Ganley. Can you both share a bit about what you do now and some of your background before your current roles? So let's start with Hannah. Hannah, talk to us about what you do now and maybe a bit about your past that led you up to your current role.
Yeah, so I'm currently the Director of Education and Outreach at Keep Omaha Beautiful. So I'm based in Omaha, but we really look at like the local ecosystem and how we can contribute to the local ecosystem. And a lot of that is helping people understand an urban environment and how people fit into that. And so my background is in a combination of formal and informal education. And this position is a great blend of all of the different pieces that I've put together over the years. I do a lot of education and professional development for educators, and I've been doing that for I'm kind of embarrassed to admit how long I've been doing that, but it's been, I think, close to 20 years that I've been doing that professional development workshops and helping adults grow in how they can reach kids.
Yeah, and Hannah, I've seen you in action, both with kids and with adults, and you are a phenomenal educator for adults and kids. And I highly recommend to anyone who's looking to grow their professional development on outdoor ed to try and see Hannah in some capacity. So thanks for sharing. Yeah, I mean every word I said with that. You are an awesome educator. So happy to have you on today. Miss Katie. And Katie, I've known you for a long time now, which feels crazy too. Like when you reflect on the years, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've known Katie for a long time now. Talk to our audience about what you do, Katie, and kind of what led you to your role.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Katie Krause. I'm an extension educator with the early childhood team with the University of Nebraska Extension. And yeah, I have been in Nebraska for 10 years this July 2024. So it's been a little while that I've been here. It seems to have flown by. So my background is in early childhood education. I've got my degrees are both in early childhood, a little bit of work in special ed as well. And I have really worked across the sector in the field of early childhood. I've been a classroom teacher for infants, toddlers, preschoolers, as well as early childhood special ed. I had a short stint as a director. I shout out to the directors out there. That was a few more hats than I was interested in wearing. So I was a director for a short time, all back in my home state of Ohio. I also had the privilege of working for the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, which ran the childcare, both childcare and they're also called Step Up to Quality in the state of Ohio. So I did a lot of professional development, mostly about licensing and quality initiatives in Ohio, before coming here to Nebraska, where I really switched my focus to professional development. I mostly focus in nature-based learning, which we'll talk a lot about today. And then I do quite a bit as well with emergent curriculum and pedagogy. So really thinking about how we work with children, following children's lead, do a lot of documentation and sharing our story, which I'll also share a little bit later on today, which really just dovetails so great with what nature-based learning is. I've always loved the outdoors myself, kind of grew up in the city of Cleveland in a pretty urban area, but in my little backyard, I created quite my own little magical land of nature back there. So just a huge believer in children's time outdoors.
Yay. I didn't know. This is why I like doing these podcasts. I didn't know some of that about you, Katie. I didn't know you were a director for a little bit.
Yeah, it was. Yes, I was. It was
tricky, right?
Yeah,
tricky job. Yeah.
People that know me know that I'm a very I do very emergent learning with adults, and the owner was very black and white about everything, and I just had a hard time with that.
I think that leadership hat has to be very, very, very tricky and joyful too, but very tricky. I've never worn that hat. I really don't ever intend to wear that hat, to be honest. I know it's not a hat that fits on my head. Yeah, you're not putting it on. But you mentioned your love for nature-based learning and for outdoor ed, and that's what our theme is, listeners, today, is talking about why that matters, what it is, how you can incorporate a little bit more of that in your practice. So Katie, talk to us a little bit about young children and what are the benefits of being outside? What are the benefits of nature-based ed? Why does it all matter?
I'll start off too with kind of just a little bit of some kind of definitions from the research. So some people call things outdoor education and then nature-based learning. And outdoor education and nature-based learning, lots of people use them kind of interchangeably. Mm-hmm. My opinion is call it whatever you want, whatever makes the most sense to you. Outdoor education tends to be a little bit more focused on teaching children about nature. Nature-based learning is kind of this intersection of what we call learning in, through, and with nature. So we're not always learning about what kind of bug we're looking at. We can, but we might be thinking about, we might be connecting things back to different types of learning that are happening a little more holistically. But there's no judgment. The nature-based folk are real nice about not judging other people very much. So yeah, but my biggest thing I hear though is a lot of times people are worried that, oh, well, I don't know about what plants and animals are out there, so I can't do this because I don't know. So that's not true at all. And the benefits for children are just, there's tons of research on the benefits, right, of being outdoors and for children, and really from infants all the way through the elderly. And the benefits are, I would kind of argue, are even more important for young children because we know, of course, the physical benefits. When children are outside, we know that they are more physically active. It's just what nature allows and outdoor time outdoors allows compared to being in an indoor space. But we also think about things like their vestibular system. So that's all of how we get our balance and how one day when I'm supposed to sit in a chair, when I'm hopefully in first, second, third grade and beyond, where I'm asked to sit down and sit still and listen, we're actually developing our ability to do that when we're little. And the more children move their bodies and the more they move their bodies in dynamic ways, rolling down hills, climbing up trees, jumping from stone to stone, lifting heavy things, right? Those are all things that they can develop outdoors better than really anywhere else that we can create. Tons of opportunity for social emotional development. A lot of my work is in creating outdoor spaces for children, naturalizing outdoor spaces in childcare programs and other places children are. And we always talk about dramatic play, like a dramatic play kitchen or dramatic play stage, which is great. Children do dramatic play everywhere outside. And we know a big component of dramatic play is being able to play with others. So when your children are outside, they're just it lends itself, affords itself to all these different types of play. Another great thing too about the outdoors is just the mental health benefits for children, and we'd argue for teachers as well. When you've got a space outdoors that's working for you, whether it's a created natural space outdoors, whether it's your traditional outdoor space that maybe you've added a couple things to kind of extend time kids want to be out there, or out in a more wild space. Children tend to get way more engaged in what they're doing. Teachers can either engage and learn along with them, or they can sit back and observe, take a little time to breathe themselves, and just enjoy being with children and enjoy being outdoors and just glean all those benefits from, fresh air, sunlight, even things like vision. I'll end on this one, but it's, one of my most fascinating things about the outdoors is that our vision actually really is improved from being outdoors. We are seeing higher instance of nearsightedness. So nearsighted is people that have a hard time seeing far away. And a big belief, and the reason for that is not just screen time. They think, increased screen time is not helping, but it's actually the bigger issue is not as much time outdoors. Because when you are outdoors compared to an indoor space, your eyes have to work harder to look further away. You're actually exercising those eye muscles. And when children are indoors, their eyes don't have to look as far. They only look across the room compared to, miles away at the clouds or down the street or across the prairie or across the cornfields, whatever their view might be. And then even just exposure to sunlight as well really helps your eyes. So if anything else, we got to help keep kids' eyes functioning properly. So get outside as much as you can.
Oh my gosh, I love all the little facts that you just in that short amount of time were able to share with us. And as you're talking, I'm having all these ahas. First, about the eyesight thing. I think that is so cool. I think I've heard Hannah say that before too. And whatever, yeah, which I think the research behind that is very interesting. But the other thing that kind of struck me, Katie, was we've had Ray Pica on the podcast. We had her last season and she is on this season as well. She's back again, Ray. But she does a lot of speaking upon the importance of play. And she also talks a lot about young children and how they're able to sit in a chair or move their bodies, or they're really not supposed to be from the head up, like it's the whole child that we're focusing on. So when you were talking about, those skills that they have with outdoor experiences set them up to be able to be a third grader who can sit in a desk for a little bit. Like that to me was like an aha, like connect the dots kind of moment. So
it seems a little crazy, but the way that you teach children to sit still later on in life is to let them move now.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I love how you tied that in with being outside. I never really would have thought of it as nature-based learning impacting what happens in the classroom later, but it totally does. And that makes really good sense. So thanks for sharing all that. Hannah, so you have and you're nodding along as Katie was, our listeners can't see, but you're nodding along as Katie was talking about all the benefits and the why and the research. But Hannah, I know that you have so many resources for the how of working with the outdoors and young children. What are a few tips or strategies that you could give to our providers listening if they are just starting to think about, I want to try some more of this, like I want to try and increase my outdoor time, or I want to try and be a little bit more nature-based with what I'm doing? How do I start if I'm a provider who's wanting to add a little bit more?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I think there's a lot of people who want to do it and don't know how to start. They don't know how to take their first steps. And my advice for everyone is just dive in, just go do it. It's never going to be perfect, and it's always going to be frustrating because there will always be something that goes wrong. But it's like anything you do with kids. And so I think you just have to dive in, and you also have to have fun with it. I think that if you want nature-based play or nature outdoor education or whatever term you're using to kind of go back to what Katie was saying, if you want to be successful with it, you have to have fun with it, and the kids have to have fun with it. So it could be, I'm thinking of like winter programs when I'm talking to daycare providers about, or preschool teachers about how it can take so long to get the kids dressed up for winter so they can go outside. And you get outside and you're there for 10 minutes and then someone has to go to the bathroom. And so you have to walk right back inside. And it can be very frustrating when that happens. But if you flip that around and you think, we got to spend 10 minutes outside, and the kids were learning how to get themselves dressed because they were helping with their zippers, and they were, focusing on making sure they had their mittens. And so there's different parts that they're learning in all of those different pieces. And the more you do it, the faster it'll become. And the kids are going to understand that, yeah, we do actually have to go potty before we go outside, just like we were told to do. And but if you make it fun and you always have some piece that gets the kids excited about it, then they want to have fun. And if it's fun for us, we want to go out and do it more. So I think that's the biggest tip I have for people is remember the fun, and just dive in and try it. I also think that it's really important to be consistent. Kids love routine. And if you do an outdoor education piece, or if you do a nature play day where it's one thing, kids don't know what the routine is. They don't know what to expect. And so it can get very frustrating for everyone because they don't know what to do. But if you do it on a regular basis and they understand that we have to put on our shoes and we have to put on our coat or whatever the pieces that they need to do for that time of year, the kids get used to it. And so then they're ready to go outside and they understand the routine and the nature of it. And they understand they're going to be outside for a certain amount of time and then they'll come back inside for something. And they understand how to make it part of what they want to do. And they also understand what the rules are. And kids like knowing what the rules are. And it makes it more fun. And I think the final tip is like, just to remember that some days are better than others and to focus on those good days. And it can be really fun to do the things that get messy and to do the things that get confusing or don't go the way we think they're going to go. I think whenever I take kids outside, nothing ever goes the way I think it's going to go. And it's always educational and it's always fun if you have the right lens and how you're looking at it. And so I think just having the right approach to how you kind of dive in and do it is the right way to approach it.
That's such good advice. Like, it's all about perspective. If I am dreading as the adult, I have to get all these toddlers dressed in these boots and I have to get them all ready and it takes forever, versus seeing it as learning, teachable moments for toddlers to practice skills with self-help. And then when I'm outside, if I have an attitude of, oh my gosh, how much longer do we have to be out here, versus, oh my gosh, how cool is this to experience with my kids, who it's like a whole brand new world too.
Yeah, and like this time of year, I'm talking about cold winter days because I'm wishing for cold winter days right now. But when it's 95 degrees to go outside with the kids, and if all I can think is I'm going to be so hot and miserable, the kids are going to be hot and miserable. They're going to pick up on that for me. But if we think, oh, we're going to go play in the sprinkler, or we're going to go see if we can find where animals would cool off and find shady spots. Now we're changing the perspective and we're doing something to think about it in a different way and make it fun for the kids.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about lens and perspective, and it is what you make. And they do feed off our energy, right? They are so in tune to us. So those are great tips, Hannah. Thanks for sharing that. Katie, you are also a queen of resources. Everywhere I go, people talk about you. They really do. Across the entire state, everybody knows Katie, and Katie is a very hands-on helper, is what I would call you, Katie, a hands-on helper. So talk to us, and are there any other tips you'd add to Hannah's amazing strategies that she shared?
Yeah, sure. So Hannah and I work together a lot, especially here in the Omaha area. And I'm laughing because I feel like Hannah just made a perfect segue for the things that I wanted to make sure I shared here, which are about shade and comfort. And a lot of my work with Nebraska Extension is with a project we have called Early Childhood Health Outdoors, which again, it's this project we work on with National Wildlife Federation out of Colorado and our colleagues in North Carolina State University. And we're really working on ways to create small incremental changes to create more natural, engaging outdoor play spaces for children. And one of the biggest issues that we see is outdoor spaces that are not engaging enough and not comfortable enough. Yeah. So, so we think about whether it's the heat of summer, ideally, at least half of your outdoor space should be shaded. We know most sites that's not the case. If there's shade at all, it's very limited. And a lot of times over play structures that aren't a place that kids kind of hang out, right? They're usually physically active and running, not relaxing in the shady area. Yeah. So really thinking about how can you make really small changes that might have a big difference? Can you add shade to your outdoor space through shade sails? Or can you add a wind block, in the middle of the winter when you've got that north wind come in and maybe your playground's on the northwest side of your building and it's extremely cold, can you put up some type of a temporary wind block of some kind that will help maybe make warmer spaces outside for yourselves in the winter? Could you get into what we call the beyond spaces? So we think when we go outdoors, we have indoor space, anything inside. Our outdoor space we define as kind of your fenced in, like licensed area. And then the beyond is anything else beyond that. So it could be somewhere that you drive to. It could be somewhere that you walk to. It could be simply going to the other side of your building for maybe a little bit of time on a cold day because maybe the building is blocking that wind, or maybe the sun shines on that side of the building in the morning and it's a little bit warmer. And that's one thing that a resource that we provide with Nebraska Extension is we can really help you look at your outdoor space and rethink how can I get more comfortable out here? How can I make this be a true 4-season space that we can use all year round? And then rethinking what kind of materials and things you have out there. So often we think of the outdoors as a place to do physical activity, which it is. It's one of the best places, of course, for kids to be physically active. But what other materials and opportunities do you have outdoors that are going to help children go outside and want to stay outside. As you know, those are really important things. So like loose parts, outdoor play kitchens, things that kids can move around and kind of recreate their space, as they grow in age or as their interests change. Really thinking about what you've got out there, because if all you have is mulch or some fall surface and a big play structure, they might get bored. They might only want to be out there for a little while, or only your really active kids want to stay out, and all your other kids that aren't as active, they get bored because it only has physical activity focus out there. So really think about how can you meet all those types of learners outdoors.
Can I ask you a little curveball question about what you were talking about with the materials and how that matters? And you brought up like loose parts. Do you have ideas or suggestions for people listening if they're wanting to start to incorporating loose parts? Or like I've seen you both will know the fancy word for it, but the chunks of the logs.
Tree cookies.
Tree cookies, the very fancy word, tree cookies. How do I start getting that stuff? What's the best way to do that?
So the best way is to make a list and ask families to bring stuff. You might be overwhelmed because sometimes you end up with more than you need. But things like tree cookies, I have one program I work with, and whenever they hear chainsaws, like during like tree cutting season, someone jumps in the car and drives over. It's like, hi, we're from the childcare program in the neighborhood, and we need slices of trees. Can you? And they've had no problem in many, many years of having tree companies just bring them big logs, small logs, slices of logs, everything. So really, really lean into your families and your other kind of community members that you might have. Things like pipes. If somebody's a plumber, pieces of pipe work great. Just old pieces of trim, or if someone rebuilt their deck. Actually, I think I use a picture of Hannah's boys. Hannah's kiddos, I think, is a picture that she took of them with just chunks of a deck that someone had left over, deck scraps. They don't have to be fancy. You don't have to spend money on them. But those are all great kind of repurposed materials that you can use outdoors. Some programs love tires. Some programs don't love tires. There's not a one size fits all. It's really what works for you. Old kitchen materials, instead of having families donate things to, the thrift store or have a garage sale, ask for old kitchen supplies like pots and pans, strainers, muffin tins that have gotten a little rusty, right? Those are all things that can also be outside, and they can weather a little bit, out there as well. Don't hesitate to kind of create a list and ask families. We've got resources with Nebraska Extension. I know Hannah has a plethora of resources for this as well. Hopping online and just looking for loose parts outdoors, and you'll probably get a million ideas for things to try.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned. Go ahead, Hannah. I was going to pivot to you.
Oh, I was just going to say also another great thing to do is engage the kids in getting those loose parts. So if you have an opportunity, especially in those beyond spaces, to take the kids to go for a walk, give them each a grocery, a paper grocery bag, and have them fill it up with sticks or seeds, or in the fall, even dried leaves that you can use as the loose parts on your site. They always need to be restocked. So you can take the kids on a collection walk and bring them back and have them actually restock their own space. And then that also gives them a sense of ownership over it as well.
Yeah, that's such a good point, that ownership piece, because then they will be more invested in actually playing and using with those materials. I know you both have young children at home. I kind of want to see your backyards. Do you have this stuff kind of going on in your spaces?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
They're both nodding. They're like, oh yeah, duh. Talk to me a little bit about what that looks like at home. And that might even apply a little bit to some of our family childcare providers. What's it look like in your backyard? What do you provide for your own young kids to kind of engage them in nature-based play?
Katie and I are both looking at each other saying, who's going to jump in first?
Yeah, because you're like, this is a loaded question.
So I do a lot of experimenting with my kids. I make my kids be the guinea pigs before I recommend things to other people, or before I try something, sometimes at different sites, or have teachers try them. But we've done everything. I mean, different times of year, different things. But one of my favorite things, we collected Christmas trees after the holiday season, and we made a Christmas tree fort. So we sheared off the branches from one side of the Christmas tree and took like 5 Christmas trees and tied them together and kind of made like a teepee-like structure that the kids played in for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months before I finally decided it was probably a fire hazard. And at that point, then we sheared off the rest of the branches, and they used those as logs that they could build, that they could use for building structures. And they had some sheets out there that they could play with to kind of build structures. We also have a really big, I live in the middle of Omaha, so we're in a neighborhood with not huge backyards, but we have a pretty active backyard garden. And the kids are definitely involved in the gardening. So they have their own child-sized tools that they use to do the gardening. And there are some places that I have kind of, we always call them like fences to keep rabbits out, but some of them are also fences to keep 4-year-olds out or 5-year-olds out in the areas that I don't want them to get into. But there's also areas that they can access that they're allowed to dig in. And I just accept like they might kill the plants, and that's okay. And I also try to engage them in understanding which plants you can do different things with. So over here, we've got plants that you can just, pick off a leaf and eat it. And these ones over here, they're root vegetables. And if you pull them out of the ground, if you pull that carrot out of the ground, we probably need to wash it off before you eat all the dirt. And they understand the difference. But it's a learning piece for them to understand, like they can go out and harvest, but these ones need to be washed and treated a certain way, and these ones we have to cook and whatever the case may be. But they have the tools to do it on their own, so they can contribute as much as they want. And then we also just kind of change spaces as they grow. So in some places, at one point we had we don't have like a mud kitchen or anything like that, but there was a area where they were doing their own gardening. And I didn't even plant anything there. They just kind of dug in the mud, and it was kind of their mud kitchen area. But they don't use that anymore. So now we do a lot of, we have a lot of places in the yard where they can turn over rocks and find roly-polies and worms and different bugs, because that's what they're into now. So it's really kind of changing with them as we grow, and with the limited space that we have. What are their interests, and how can we adapt it to what they want to be doing? We do a lot of imaginative play. So we have, when you talk about loose parts, we have sticks of every size that can become all sorts of different things. Sometimes they become forts and different building structures, and sometimes they're swords so they can defend themselves against dragons. We have a really remarkable number of dragons who attack our house. So they always need to defend themselves against the dragons. But those sticks are in different places where they can access them, and where it doesn't bother me that there's a giant pile of sticks that are in part of the yard and not necessarily visible as you walk up the front steps, and are still make the house look decent from the street side.
Hannah, I love what you shared about your yard. I can like picture it in my mind from your description. I think it's so cool. I have started loose parts in my basement. I've talked about that before, but you inspire me to want to try and do it outside, because I feel like my kids don't have that ownership of a space outside at all. That's like, my husband wants the yard like this. Mom wants her flowers here. Like, it's very not that way. So you're making me rethink some of that. So thanks for sharing.
There's definitely a lot of, this is where you're allowed to have this parts, and we have bins to keep things in. And the backyard is where we keep a lot of that. And the front yard is more the kind of the public facing area.
Right.
So they can, fortunately, kids like to know where their boundaries are. So they do know where their boundaries are on what they can do and what they can't.
Katie, anything that you want to add to that? Do you have anything different in your backyard for your?
So it's kind of funny. So we have, we ended up mulching a large part of our, a good part of our yard. I'm not a huge fan of swings in childcare settings because they take up so much space to have a swing with the appropriate fall zone. But we do have a tree swing in our yard and one of the geodomes and a playhouse. But, my kids are in childcare much of the day, and they're in programs where my son's he's going second grade, so he's in school mostly, but they play outside a ton in after school care. And then I have a 4-year-old and a baby. She's 7 months old this summer. And they are outside tons in their spaces, which takes a lot of pressure off me to feel like we have to always be outside at home. Because by the time I get home and I make dinner and and I clean up from dinner, we're getting close to bedtime already. So I will admit, I don't spend as much time outdoors with my children during the week as I wish we did. And we have a few spaces. Our kids got really into digging holes in the grass, which is like not okay. Like you cannot dig holes in the middle of our grass. So we've done a kind of like Hannah said, kind of changing things as we go. We're trying to really encourage them. We have kind of a mud digging area that I've been trying to encourage them to go to, but I don't think they like digging in the grass for a reason. They don't want to be in like an all mud area. So we're kind of working along with the 7-year-old and the 4-year-old right now to say, okay, we are not digging in the grass. Where in this children's space in the yard do you want to create a digging space? So we're kind of in that rethinking our space right now to kind of make sure it's meeting their current needs. And then also thinking about where's going to be a safe place for the baby to be out in the yard, especially as she gets more mobile. So but ours is, we've got lots of, and then my son is starting to enjoy outside of the yard adventures. So me thinking about where's my comfort level with traffic on our kind of busy street. And, so we've got a couple out of the fenced areas, like our beyond, but still in our yard that he's venturing into, that we are just thinking about what that looks like for our family as well. So just being open-minded and, like you guys said, kind of that balance between child spaces, especially at your home, right? At a center, it should all be child spaces, but in a home setting, we've got to balance that spaces for children and spaces for other things that our yards get used for. So.
Yeah, I love that. I like that you're both saying clear expectations, like following the lead of the kids, but also it's still not just free for all. Like there's still expectations of what you can do, what you can't, what is safe, what the beyond looks like. And as I know, Katie, I have my boy is 11, and the beyond is getting bigger, and I need to allow that to happen, and it's hard. It gets tricky as they get older. I'm like, well, the theme of our entire season for season 3 is advocacy. And I know you are both huge advocates about outdoor time with kids and getting them to really love nature from a young age. So can you share how you see yourselves as advocates for early childhood education? And we'll start with Hannah and then have Katie respond too.
So I think when people think of advocacy, they sometimes think like I need to be in working with the government and I need to be making changes that way. And I think that a lot of times people forget that advocacy needs to start with education and understanding. And at Keep Omaha Beautiful, we actually have a big push. A big part of our mission really is advocacy. And a lot of it stems from education and really getting people to understand why what we're doing is so important, and why with Keep Omaha Beautiful, why place-based education is so important, why nature-based education is so important, and why really connecting people to the natural world is so important. And like Katie was saying earlier about like people's mental and physical well-being, and how being outside in nature spaces, whether it's in the outside or in the beyond spaces, why that's so important to our development or our physical and mental well-being, and why it's so important for kids and adults, that we all can benefit from those spaces. And I think that that's a huge part of what as educators we can do, and how we can contribute to this, and teaching not just the parents that we're working with and the kids that we're working with, why it's important to have those outdoor spaces, but also our coworkers and our directors who sometimes don't always see the benefit of having a mud day or a rain walk, because it's messy and it's hard, but there's so many benefits to that. And having a mud day where you get to celebrate mud, actually helps people understand how things grow. And it can, if you do it the right way, it can also be something that helps people understand the importance of soil in our ecosystem, and why in an urban ecosystem we need to take care of all of the parts of the process of the soils and the trees and how everything works together, and how much we can engage as a community by having fun experiences outside like that. And as we think of kind of moving forward and how these kids are going to have to care for the world in the future, having them have fun outside is going to be really essential when it comes to them caring for the environment in the future. And so advocating for them to have those experiences, whether it's explaining to a parent why their kid's going to go home a little bit muddy on some days, or why, helping a coworker understand why, yes, even though it's a little bit hot, we're going to go outside today, even for a short period of time. It's going to be really helpful for the kids, and it's going to be really helpful for their long-term well-being. And I think that that's why it's so important to advocate for outdoor education for kids, and for them to have those experiences that they can rely back on when they're adults and taking care of the environment. And hopefully they become passionate about caring for the environment the way I am, and the way I think Katie is, and the way I think we need to be if we're going to kind of take care of the future and the world we live in.
This is why we invited you both on this episode. I was like, I can't think of two better advocates for nature education, nature-based learning, outdoor ed, whatever verbiage we want to use when we're talking about getting kids excited about caring for our environment and looking towards the future. What a great way to sum that up, Hannah. Thank you for sharing that. Katie, do you have other additional things you would add? She's just waiting. I'm like, oh my God.
I was just laughing because as Hannah was speaking, I was just reminded of why I love to partner with Hannah, because she, with her work with Keep Omaha Beautiful, really takes that great holistic environmental advocacy view on things in a way that we do with Nebraska Extension as well. We do with my own work, but a lot of my work focuses a lot on advocating for the importance of time outdoors in our increasingly educationally focused world. Right. So how do we get children to be outdoors? I've worked with folks that are working on their step up to quality and trying to get a higher rating with step up to quality. And I've gotten told I can't do outdoor learning and be a step up to quality rated site, or I can't get a 5. And that's not true at all. It's totally possible. I would argue it might even be easier depending upon, what methods you're using to be outdoors. So I do a lot of work on sharing your story, right? Share your story and trying to help give a voice to children who are spending time outdoors, and giving a voice to those teachers and educators who are outdoors with children. So I do a lot of my advocacy work, again, trying to help share that message. A lot of my work is with I do a lot of preaching to the choir. There's a lot of people I work with that really already are big believers in the importance of time outdoors, and they either are trying to justify it to some families that they might have in their care. They're trying to justify it to their program owner or program administrators or coworkers. And they feel all these barriers of, I need to be inside teaching children all of these things when I know it's best to be outside. So I do a lot of work in helping them think about, okay, we all know, we're all drinking the same Kool-Aid, but we have to share our story if we're going to help other people learn about why this is so important and valuable, right? So we have to document, we have to connect to the early learning guidelines, which can all be done. And I always challenge people, and I say, let me spend 15 minutes outside with your kids and I can find every single domain of learning happening. Yeah. Easily, right? More so than I could indoors. So again, really thinking about how do we share our story? So often I have, pushback that, licensing won't let me do that. That's also not true. Nebraska's licensing specialists, and their the leader in the Department of HHS is actually a big advocate of outdoor play and learning. So if you're running into issues or concerns, you can always reach out to Hannah and I. I've got a lot of connections and knowledge about national standards for playground safety. And if something, right, safety is always paramount, but usually most of our outdoor play settings fit pretty well into those standards. So again, it's sharing your story, connecting things to what standards already are in existence. And that's really how we can raise up this important work and be outside as much as kids want to, which is probably all day, every day, all year round.
Thank you for sharing that about step up to quality and maybe squashing some of those misconceptions of I can't do outdoor-based learning and be a step 5. It's just simply not true. We have lots of sites that are step 5 that are very outdoor-based. There are actually a few of them are interviewed this season on our podcast. So I would just say, I love, Katie, that you mentioned it can be as simple, advocacy is as simple as sharing your stories and the power of sharing your story, connecting it to the ELGs, like making it very research-based, but still not as fancy or scary as what some people might think when we say the word advocate. Like it can be as simple as sharing your story. So thank you both for sharing your stories today. Thanks for joining this session with us today. This was a goodie. I think we could probably go a whole nother half hour. I know I could, because I have more questions in the back of my head that I do want to ask you. So maybe we'll sign you up for another little episode in the future if you're willing. Also, can I have your permission to link in our show notes where our listeners can reach out and find you? Is that something you're comfortable with?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Great. So listeners, I will make sure that you can access both the Katie and Hannah super advocates of increasing outdoor time with your kiddos. And I'm just so thankful that you both said yes and joined and shared all your expertise. So thanks for being with us today. And thank you, everyone, for spending quality time with us. Please join again as we chat about future topics to support our Nebraskan providers on their journey with Step Up to Quality. Until next time, bye-bye.